is Isaiah chapter 43. Isaiah chapter 43, beginning at verse 16 through verse 21. I'm reading from the New Living Translation. I encourage you to stand if you're able. I am the Lord who opened a way through the waters, making a dry path through the sea. I called forth the mighty army of Egypt with all its chariots and horses. I drew them beneath the waves, and they drowned, their lives snuffed out like a smoldering candle wick. But forget all that. It's nothing compared to what I am just about to do, for I'm going to do something new. See, I have already begun. Do you not perceive it? I will make a pathway through the wilderness. I will create rivers in the dry wasteland. The wild animals in the fields will thank me, the jackals and the owls too, for giving them water in the desert. I will make rivers in the dry wasteland, so my chosen people can be refreshed. I have made Israel for myself, and they will someday honor me before the whole world. This is the word of the Lord. You may be seated. So the prophet Isaiah quotes God, Redeemer, Creator, King, to despairing people who are exiled to Babylon. Do not remember the former things, he said. Do not consider the things of old. I'm just about to do a brand new thing. It springs forth. Can you not see it? I will make a way through the wilderness and rivers in the desert. A road through the wilderness from Babylon all the way back to their homeland of Jerusalem. Rivers coursing through that arid land. They were stuck in their spiritual lives. Exiled, mired in spirit, despairing, giving up hope. They thought there was no way out of their exile. They were displaced. They'd been there a couple of generations already, and the youngest ones among them have no memory of home, except those tales they heard told by their sad-eyed parents who remembered how it used to be. Babylon is home now to many of these Jews, and Judah is a rapidly disappearing dream. So Isaiah is inspired to respond to their despair and their guilt by weaving a beautiful poetic vision. He pictures the exiles marching to Zion, marching triumphantly home on a new wilderness road. They pause now and again to slake their thirst through rivers streaming through the desert. They will know then who cares for them. They will know who provides for them, and they will know they are no longer captives. Do we ever feel stuck? Do we ever feel like we are kind of exiled? How small-minded of us to imagine that God can't make a way where there seems to be no way. We serve the same God, the wilderness road builder, the river wrangler, the desert gardener. He can make everything new, and every day is a new beginning. Every day is a new day. There's still a way ahead for us if we dare take the first step of faith. Thank you for reading Philippians Chapter 3. That's where we're going next. Philippians 3 is a guide to a determined journey of faith out of exile through the wilderness back home spiritually. And Paul, in those verses, speaks honestly about the pitfalls in his own life and how he overcame them. On the surface, Saul, that was his pre-conversion name, looked pretty good. He writes about that in his first verses. Circumcised the 8th day, of the tribe of Benjamin, a member of the people of Israel, a Hebrew of Hebrews, as to the law, a Pharisee, as to zeal, persecuting the church, as to righteousness under the law, blameless. In other words, he thought he had it made spiritually.
doing the right things, playing by the rules, fulfilled other people's expectations. But there was one big problem. He felt spiritually dead on the inside. He was so frustrated. And that frustration turned to rage inside him and began to focus on that new sect of people called Christians. Saul, uber righteous Pharisee, traveled up and down the length of the land, arresting followers of Christ, taking them to prison, and breathing out threats and slaughter. Think of him as Jewish Taliban, a fanatic, a militant. And all of his militant friends agreed with him and applauded him, but it didn't make him feel any better about what he was doing. And the more he saw of Christians, the more he saw of the simple, joyful ways that they lived, the more he began to wonder what was wrong with him. Why did he feel so empty inside? The book of Acts tells how Saul presided over the stoning of the first Christian martyr named Stephen. Saul ran the coat check while the mob did their grisly work. And the story concludes with this chilling line: Saul approved of what they were doing. He approved of the killing of Stephen. He goes on to say that Paul dragged men and women, committing them to prison. House after house, he breathed out threats and slaughters. His anger, his hatred toward Christians made him into someone who was not a nice man. Acts says he subsisted on his anger. He breathed in threats. He breathed out anger. He was miserable. And then one day he heard a voice on the road to Damascus, the voice of Jesus saying, "Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me?" And he fell apart. 3 years later, he came back a changed man, wonder of wonders, miracle of miracles. This persecutor of Christians, this murderer of the saints, had become a follower of Christ. Years later, he wrote these words to the Philippians that conveyed the secret of how he got out of that spiritual rut. "Forgetting what lies behind and straining toward what lies ahead, I press on toward the mark of the goal of the prize of the heavenly call of God in Christ Jesus." If you and I are going to live a victorious Christian life, we need to do three things. Forsake the pull of the past. Forget what lies behind. Overcome the inertia of the present. Strain forward to what lies ahead, and listen to the call of the future, pressing on toward the goal of the prize of the heavenly call in Christ Jesus. First, forsake the pull of the past. Sometimes the past is our worst enemy. We've all done terrible, painful things in all of our past. We have a guilty past, skeletons in the closet, if you want to call it that. Things we'd rather not remember, but they come back to haunt us. They still bother us. Blessed are those who can set the past pain aside. The late Senator John McCain, famed for service as a senator, presidential candidate, and as a war hero, as you remember the story, as a young Navy pilot during the Vietnam War, had been a POW after being shot down. In 2000, he returned to Vietnam and visited the lake near Hanoi where he had parachuted in his plane that was stricken down. He recalled how on that day in 1967 his captors had dragged him ashore, beaten him severely, put him in prison for more than 4 years, much of it in solitary confinement. The reporters wanted to know, how do you feel now about visiting Vietnam after all that time? Are you bitter? Are you angry? And he said, I put the Vietnam War behind me a long time ago. I harbor no anger. I harbor no rancor. In fact, he went on to advocate in Congress for millions of dollars to support the Vietnamese government. He had put behind him what was past. There's an old story. an old baseball story about a pitcher named Oral Hershiser. You know it? Hershiser, in his book Out of the Blue, shares the secret of his success. In years of playing, he learned as he ascended the mound to focus on one thing and one thing only, the next pitch. He banished the thought of the last pitch, which was not a good one, or the bad call of the umpire. He put all that aside, and his total focus was on the next pitch. He became very successful as a pitcher. The next pitch. We would do well to give our full attention to this day. Now, here. Not nowhere, but now here. Not living in the past, not living in the future, but this present moment. Yesterday's over. You can't change it. Can't do a thing about it. You can let it change you, and I can let it change me if I wallow in it. But God has forgotten our past. He's promised. He has cast it aside. We need to do the same. Forgiven. Imagine what you and I could accomplish if we directed our energy to this day. Today is the day of salvation. Now is the accepted time. Not yesterday. Don't live in the guilt of the past or the pain of the past. Put it behind you. Forget the past and live by God's grace today. Secondly, we have to overcome the inertia of the present. Paul speaks of straining forward to what lies ahead. We are made to walk forward. It's hard to walk backwards. It could be dangerous to walk backwards. God made us to walk forward, and so we are to strain forward. This is the image of the athlete in Greece and Rome on a foot race. They love those stadium contests, the track and field events they call them, and the soldiers of the empire kept in fighting trim by such events. They loved those distance races that required fortitude and endurance, straining forward to what lies ahead. This is the image of the runner who puts his chest forward as he crosses the finish line. And every step the runner takes is one step nearer the finish line, moving toward a goal, forward. We need to get over that inertia that would keep us stuck where we are. See, there's not just physical inertia, there's spiritual inertia. We are comfortable. We get complacent in our spiritual lives. We like same old, same old, same old, don't we? Knew him? I knew him. Never heard that before. I don't want to learn anything new. You know, one of my favorite verses in the Psalms is sing a new song to the Lord. Sing a new song to the Lord. Well, I don't want to change our tradition. We've got to leave it just like it was. You mean you want me to do something new in the church? You want me to get involved in the church? I've been a spectator here for many years. I'm comfortable just like it is. Don't ask me to do anything. I'm just happy being here. You should be thankful I'm here. There's a word for that inertia, that spiritual inertia that says I'm stuck in the present and I love it right where it is. It's one of the 7 deadly sins, and it's called sloth. Don't you love that word? Sloth. Ever see a picture of a sloth hanging from the tree? Just hanging around, doing nothing? When we think of that word, we may think of laziness, being a couch potato. Well, that's part of it, but that's not all there is to it. To be slothful is to be spiritually inert. It means to have a kind of a virus of the soul that says, I don't care about doing anything. I don't want to get involved in anything. I just want to be comfortable. Just let me alone. Don't bother me with meaning and purpose and significance. That's what it means. It's a spiritual inertia that we need to get over. I got a text this morning from Words with Friends saying, you have any time you need to kill this weekend? And I thought, no, I don't think I have any time I need to kill this weekend. We don't need to kill time. Thoreau once said, as if you could kill time without injuring eternity. So we need to get over this inertia that says I'm just going to do crossword puzzles and watch TV and sit on the couch and do absolutely nothing. And spiritually, we also need to realize there are opportunities all around us to love life and live life and serve God. And be awake, not passive. One of our problems is we get distracted, don't we? There's so many things to do. Sometimes I tell people I have absolute proof that there is an eternity. And they say, really, how do you know that? And I said, because when you put together everything you know you ought to do, everything you'd like to do, everything you're told you have to do, you put all that together, there's never enough time. There's got to be an eternity. But things distract us. Think of the image of a lion tamer at the circus. When you picture a lion tamer, what sort of equipment does he have? A whip, probably. A pistol, for sure. But what else does he or she have? Well, the whip and the pistol could frighten the beast, but why the third item? You know what it is? A chair. Why does the lion tamer have a chair? The reason is the four legs of the chair interfere with the lion's visual perception. You wave that chair in front of the lion's face, and the lion's brain tries to focus on all four legs at once. That overloads the neural circuits, the scientists say. And the beast is paralyzed and overwhelmed, passive, weak, disabled, because its attention is fragmented. It can happen to us too. Try to look at too many things at once. You lose your ability to press forward to what lies ahead. Sit back on your haunches and just take it all in. We need to focus, as Paul said in Philippians Chapter 3, on this one thing. Not 100 things. Focus on this one thing. I remember a Sunday school teacher of Beverly's when I was dating her a long, long time ago. And her Sunday school teacher mispronounced the word consecration. She always said concentration. And it kind of caught my ear. To be consecrated is to be concentrated, to focus, not to be fragmented, to live with intention. So we need to focus on the race. And third, finally, we need in our spiritual life to listen to the call of the future. Press on toward the goal for the prize of the heavenly call of God in Christ Jesus. Why does the runner run in the foot race? Well, unless you're on a treadmill and you're not going anywhere, you have a goal in mind. You're trying to cross the finish line. We need faith in the Lord, and that faith is focused toward the future. God calls us from the future. He doesn't call us from the past. And we sometimes are afraid of the future. Things are changing so rapidly, we don't want too much to change. We want to keep things as they are. But according to Philippians 3, our goal should be to look forward, not just yearn for the good old days. How many times Baptists have said that? Looking to the good old days can hinder our progress. You ever heard these kind of sayings? We've never done it that way before. Ever heard that? We've never done it that way before. Nobody's ever done it that way before. It didn't work then. It won't work now. It should be referred to a committee. You know what that means? I need to sleep on it. It's too radical. I'm too old for that. Anybody ever said I'm too old for that? Not my problem, not my job. We've always done it the other way. Does that ring any bells? What we're doing when we talk like that is looking backwards, and we're not looking forward. We can't listen to God's call that comes from the future if we're always concentrating on how it used to be, what we used to do in the good old days. The truth is, this is the good new day of God. Every day is a good day. Every day is a new day. And faith is believing in advance what will only make sense in reverse, according to Philip Yancey. Faith, we say it again, is believing in advance what will only make sense in reverse. I know hindsight is 20/20. I always say that. I guess it's true. But if you're going to go somewhere, you don't drive looking in the rearview mirror, no matter how clear the glass may be. Looking forward. On John Greenleaf Whittier's birthday, he wrote these words, "Before me, even as behind me, God is, and all is well." They also say, where there's life, there's hope. And what that means is, as long as you live and breathe and you can move, you have hope you're going to keep living. But there's another truth there. You could also put it this way: where there's hope, there's life. Where there's hope, there's life. You know my favorite quotation? By now you could all say it by memory. The theologian Ruben Alves says, "Hope is listening to the melody of the future, and faith is dancing to that melody here and now." If you hear the melody of the future, if you hear that future call of God, then you can dance by faith here and now. It makes a difference. Where there is hope, there is life. This is a true story that happened in a German POW camp during World War II. Somehow, unbeknownst to the guards, the American prisoners managed to scrape together enough electronic components to make a radio. They tuned it in and kept it tuned in to the BBC. And one day, news came over the radio that the German High Command had surrendered and the war was over. The word had not yet filtered back to the prison guards. Suddenly, a change came over the prisoners. The guards were flustered. They didn't know what was going on with these prisoners. The prisoners were laughing and telling jokes and smiling over the stale bread and watery soup they were eating. They were even laughing at the shepherd dogs, laughing, having a great time. The guards didn't know what was going on. On the fourth day, after the news broadcast, the prisoners awoke to discover the gates were wide open and the guards were gone. Wide open. Life was different. It was different to the guards because they knew something was true that was going to improve their life more than they'd ever dreamed possible. The difference was the news they heard of something that was sure to happen in the future, and the promise made all the difference on how they lived day by day. We have a promise too. The promise of the future. The promise that God is not finished with us yet. The promise that one day everything that we can't understand will be very, very clear. And because we've heard that promise and because we know it is true, we can get up from our spiritual inertia, from the place where we are, where we feel stuck, and move on and finish the race for the reward of His smile. Live hopefully. Live optimistically. Live passionately, believing the future is as bright as the promises of God. One of my favorite quotes from a Russian novelist, Fyodor Dostoevsky, describes from his mind what the future will be like. This is what he wrote back in the 19th century. Today, he said, we amass material things without ever satisfying our greed. And then we madly squander everything we amass. But one day will come, there will be no orphans and no beggars. Everyone will be as one of my own family. That is when I will have gained everything and everyone. Today, even some of the richest and most powerful people care nothing about how long they've been given to live, because they can no longer think up ways to use their hours. But one day, our hours will be multiplied 1,000-fold. We will live every one of them in the joy of our hearts. Then wisdom will not come from books, but from living in the presence of God. The earth will grow brighter than the sun. There will be no sadness. There will be no sighs. The whole world will be paradise. Amen. Several months ago, I started signing all my letters looking forward. I don't know what prompted me to do that, but I just thought it's about time we quit looking back so much. And even looking around. If you look back, you might be filled with regret. If you look around, you might be filled with despair. But if you look forward to the promises of God, if you hear that melody of the future, then you can dance by faith today. So, let's do it. Let's do it. Let's forget the past. Let's get over our spiritual inertia, and let's look forward by the promises of God. It's always a new day. Always a new day.